Well, hello, Nativity Bibleheads. It is Dr. Wayne, and it is time for Bible Study Wednesday. We're looking at 2 Kings chapter 8 today. We've been in a bunch of stories about Elisha, the prophet, dealing with kings of both Israel and the kingdom to the north, Aramea. We've seen a considerable amount of interaction with this kingdom to the north. Remember the context of the book of Kings is the exilic community. Okay, here is a community of faith that had lost their land. They had been taken to a foreign land. They were up in Babylon, and when they look back on their history, they are seeing that God uses what we call foreign powers, foreign interests, to effect his will. In the case of Israel, they had been exiled. They had been at the mercy of an overlord that was not of their choosing. And so in these stories, we want to always look for what is the message to a community of faith in that situation. The Germans would use this phrase, the Sitz im Leben, the situation in life. What's the situation in life that they were going through? So let's look at 2 Kings chapter 8. I'm not going to do the whole chapter today because halfway through it diverges to a whole nother train of thought, and I'm going to save that till next week. So we're just going to be doing the first couple of what's called the pericopes of chapter 8. Verses 1 through 6, and then all the way to verse 15 with the second one, and then that will be it for this week. After all, it is summer, so, I'm committed to doing this every week, but I'm not committed to making it drawn out. You know what I mean? Okay, here we go. Chapter 8 of 2 Kings. Now, Elisha had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, okay, here's a reference. If you haven't been following along, you're going to have to look back in chapter 4, verses 8 to 37. In fact, we're going to look back at it right now because it's very important that we get this in mind. What happened in 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 8 through 37? Well, back in the earlier in the book, our narrator, and not the narrator, the redactor of the book, the person who put it together, paratactically, do we know this word? Paratactically would just throw together some incidents in Elisha's career. That paratactically means that they don't necessarily have any sort of chronological order. They're just kind of like stories that are thrown together to illustrate a certain point. And in in chapter 4, there were some incidents that were mentioned that were intended to increase the credentials of the prophet Elisha. And one of them was this woman. She was a wealthy woman. She had an older husband, was not pregnant, recognized Elisha as a man of God, suggested and then fulfilled on providing him a place, a room, if you will, in her home, complete with furnishings. And when Elisha visits her, he's always got his faithful companion, Gehazi. And the woman is from Shunem, so we call her the Shunammite Woman. She offers her the place. She offers him the place to stay, and Elisha offers something in return. What can I do for you, kind of a thing. And she's like, nah, I'm good. And so Elisha offers her, well, okay, I see you have no son and your husband is old. That's what the text says. And I promise you that you will basically get pregnant and have a son. And she's like, what? Don't you dare get my hopes up for nothing. And well, she does conceive, she bears a son. She has a child. The child, there's a story later on in life where the child is experiencing some sort of trauma and dies in her lap. And and Elisha comes by again, and the woman gives him a tongue lashing. Didn't I tell you? Didn't I tell you not to get my hopes up? How dare you do that? Well, Elisha says, well, let's see if we can get this little kid back to life. Well, actually, all of this happened through messengers and such. And so he sends Gehazi, his son, his faithful assistant, with his staff to lay at the boy's head to revive him. It didn't work. The Shunammite woman, in her behesting of Elisha, said, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you can send your assistant with his staff, but you're coming with me. I'm not leaving you out of my sight till I see that my son is alive again. Well, as it turns out, the staff didn't do any good. She does go back with Elisha. Elisha, and this is all in 2 Kings chapter 4. Elisha goes through the ritual of doing the raising the boy to life. It's a resuscitation. We don't call this resurrection because resurrection is something different. Resurrection is when you don't die again. Resuscitation, coming back to life, there is going to be another death. So just so you got that technicality. Anyway, he raises the boy to life by laying on him, walking around the room. He does again, and it's kind of like a imitative magic kind of a thing. And the boy does come back to life. And so there is a history, if you will, between Elisha and this woman and her son, and that's the last we heard of her until now in 2 Kings chapter 8, where I just read. Now Elisha had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, "Get up and go with your household and settle wherever you can, for the Lord has called for a famine, and it will come on the land for 7 years." So he kind of gives them a heads up. It says, hey, you're not going to want to be here when this famine hits. And we've heard about famine. Sometimes it's a result of siege from the Arameans from the north, and sometimes it's just a matter of drought. But nevertheless, he gives her a heads up. Verse 2. So the woman got up and did according to the word of the man of God. She went with her household and settled in the land of the Philistines 7 years. So we're kind of seeing a picture that maybe her husband is dead by now. Remember, he was elderly when the boy was born. We don't see any mention of him now. You would think that we would if it weren't for the fact that, it mentions that she went with her household. She was wealthy. So the fact that her husband was dead would mean she does still have a household, which means it's not just full of kids, but, people that work for her, right? She had a thriving business going on. Verse 3, at the end of the 7 years, when the woman returned from the land of the Philistines, she set out to appeal to the king for her house and her land. So apparently what had happened while she was away was someone had taken it. We are not told if it was just, what do you call those people who just take over some sitters, squanderers. What are they called? There's a word for it, for people. Squatters. We don't know if they're squatters or if maybe taken into royal custody, or maybe the manager, maybe the neighbor had just overtaken it while she was away, right? We're not told who took it, but it is key to see that she lost it. Now the king was talking with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, "Tell me all the great things that Elisha has done." So the scene moves, if you will. Look at this. So she comes back, she discovers, she doesn't have her house. So she sets out to appeal to the king. And so the scene shifts to the king, and he is with Gehazi, not with Elisha, but with Gehazi, who's saying, tell me all the good deeds that Elisha has done. This is interesting because this is a point at which we see in the narrative what is going on in the community with regard to the stories of the great things that Elisha has done. Because this is the kind of thing that was going on in the community. Tell me about those things. Tell me again the story about Elisha and how he did this and how he did that and how he did this and how he did that. This is what's transpiring between Gehazi and the king. Verse 5. While he was telling the king how Elisha had restored a dead person to life, possibly the story of this woman's son, the woman whose son he had restored to life appealed to the king for her house and for her land. So she goes to the king. Elisha's not there. Gehazi is. At the same time that, what a coincidence, at the same time that Gehazi is telling the king of these great exploits of Elisha of bringing people back to life again. Gehazi said, my lord king, here is the woman and here is her son, whom Elisha restored to life. When the king questioned the woman, she told him, basically, she's providing affirmation of what Gehazi had told him. So the king appointed an official for her, saying, restore all that was hers, together with all the revenue of the fields from the day she left the land until now. That's the end of the story. Do you get the magnitude of what's going on here? She had lost it. We don't know if it was, if the restoration was a part of, we don't know who is tending to it in the meantime. What we do see here, I believe, is an example of how the faithful woman, remember this woman was in chapter 4, she was pictured as the epitome of faith, right? She recognized the power of the man of God, of Elisha. She made accommodations for him. She was rewarded with something she didn't even ask for. Because when Elisha asked her what she wanted in return, she said, I don't need anything from you. But he goes ahead and says, well, okay, well, you'll have a son. And she's like, don't you? Well, she does have a son. Yes, he dies. And then he's brought back to life. And now this. So we have a woman who has suffered injustice, great injustice, simply from the circumstances of life, okay? And she did what what Elisha had told her to do, in that she left her place, and when she comes back, somebody else has it. Okay, somebody else has taken it over, and so she goes to the highest power, and she gets relief. Okay, so this is something that in our own day and age has become highly politically partisan. It doesn't really make any sense why it's become politically partisan, because we have biblical witness, testimony for that, hey, there is a place for the governed to seek from the government restitution for past injustices. What's wrong with that? The Bible says, well, there's nothing wrong with that. Well, that's something I believe we need to take to heart when we look at our current situation today, especially when we have a lot of peoples in our land, do we not, who have been given the shaft, quite frankly. You know who those groups are. I don't need to list them. But whenever the topic comes up like, oh, well, what shall we do? How do we, well, most people say, well, we just need to move on. We just need to move on. And we just need to forget that and move on. But that's not what happened to this woman. The king didn't say, oh, you just need to move on. Whatever the past is past, and you just need to go forward now. Well, no, there was some justice. There was some restitution. I'm just pointing this out for that in the biblical economy of justice, it doesn't always match up with our ideologies. Sometimes it tweaks our ideologies. I know that I personally have had to allow the Bible to tweak my personal ideologies, because I'm a long way from where I used to be back in the days of my baccalaureate studies and master's degree studies. It's like I have allowed myself to grow. I've allowed myself to see where is the hand of God? What is God doing? How does government fit into that? Can government actually do some good? Or is government inherently evil? All of this stuff. The Bible helps shape our opinions and our attitudes if we will let it. If we don't let it, then I don't understand how we can possibly call ourselves a disciple of our Christ. We must let the biblical narrative impact our thoughts. We can't just force it to think like us. No, we cannot. We have to let Scripture inform our thoughts and our ideologies. We have to mold our ideologies and thoughts around that, not the other way around. Okay, we are moving on to another incident in chapter 8. This is in verses 7 to 15, and that's all we're going to do for today, because I knew that it was going to take such a bulk of the time just to do these two stories. Here is a totally unrelated story to the one we just read. Elisha went to Damascus while King Ben-Hadad of Aram was ill. We have seen already Elisha doing a lot of things with this kingdom to the north. This kingdom to the north, it was a predecessor to the Assyrians, who then overtook the northern kingdom, and the Assyrians were the predecessors of the Babylonian Empire that took over after that. And then you have, after that, you've got the Medes and the Persians, and eventually the Greeks and the Romans, right? Well, verse 7 again. Elisha went to Damascus. Damascus was the capital city, if you will, of that kingdom to the north, Aram, or back then it was just called Syria. While Ben-Hadad of Aram was ill, when it was told him, the man of God has come here. See, this is very interesting. Remember, this is a pagan country. This is a pagan kingdom. But yet there was strong recognition there that this man, that Elisha, had a lot of power, and that it was not to be toyed with, and it wasn't to be, I don't want to say taken for granted, but it was to be respected, to the point that he had quite a reputation, okay? The man of God has come here. The king said to Hazael, now, Hazael, spoiler alert, Hazael is going to succeed Ben-Hadad. We have not heard of Hazael since 1 Kings, remember when Elijah the prophet was going through a horrible crisis of life? Yes, he was going through some sort of a midlife crisis, and he was given some things to do, and one of which was to anoint Hazael to be king of the north, that kingdom up there of Aram. He never does. Elisha never does. But anyway, he's mentioned as somebody who is going to be the next king of that kingdom north of the northern kingdom, the north of Israel, which was called Aram or Aramea or Syria. So Hazael, whenever we hear him mentioned, we know that he's going to become king. So let us resume our narrative. Take a present with you and go to meet the man of God. So here it is, Ben-Hadad, who's ill, telling Hazael, the guy who's going to take the throne after him, go to the man of God and take gifts to him and make an inquiry. Inquire of the Lord through him whether I shall recover from this illness. So Hazael went to meet him, taking a present with him, all kinds of goods of Damascus, 40 camel loads. That's a lot of stuff. 40 camel loads of stuff? Are you kidding me? I can't help but think that this is a matter of exaggeration. It just seems exorbitant. 40 camel loads? Really? Whew. Oh, there's that number 40 again. So 40, it doesn't always mean 40. Okay, there's a lot of 40s in the Bible. Yeah, 40 doesn't always mean 40. 40 sometimes means just a goodly amount. A goodly amount. When he entered and stood before him, so it's talking about Hazael, when he stands before Elisha, he said, your son, King Ben-Hadad of Aram, so this is a way of note of deference, if you will, to refer to the king of Aram as your son. Your son, King Ben-Hadad of Aram, has sent me to you, saying, shall I recover from this illness? Elisha said to him, go, say to him, you shall certainly recover, but the Lord has shown me that he shall certainly die. What? Go say to him, you shall certainly recover, but the Lord has shown me that he shall certainly die. So he's saying, Elisha is telling Hazael to tell Ben-Hadad that he shall recover, but he's then saying to Hazael, but he is going to die. Tell him he's going to recover, but he is going to die. Interesting. He fixed his gaze and stared at him until he was ashamed. We are not 100% sure what is happening here. Is this saying that Elisha fixed his gaze upon Hazael until he was ashamed? Till who was ashamed? Till Hazael was ashamed? Was this like a staring contest? Okay, here's the thing. Spoiler alert, Hazael is going to be king. I told you this, right? And it looks like he's going to be doing it by underhanded means. It looks like a coup. It looks like he's going to actually, we'll read it here soon, but it looks like he actually kills Ben-Hadad. So it's like Elisha is telling Hazael, tell Ben-Hadad that he shall certainly recover, but he's really going to die. And I think he knows what Hazael is going to do. And he's like staring at him to the point of like, because Hazael is going to kill Ben-Hadad. And I think what's happening is Elisha is staring at him. I think he's staring at him until Hazael like can't stand it anymore. Until he was ashamed. Because Hazael, it's as though Elisha knows what's in his head, is in Hazael's head. Then the man of God wept. The weeping of Elisha could just indicate a release of extreme emotion. Verse 12, Hazael asked, "Why does my Lord weep?" He answered, "Because I know the evil that you will do to the people of Israel. You will set their fortresses on fire. You will kill their young men with the sword, dash in pieces their little ones, and rip up their pregnant women." It's as though Elisha he knows all this is true. Hazael is going to do all this bad stuff. And Elisha knows that he is powerless to do anything about it. I think it has something to do with the fact that he knows that God is basically going to like effect war on his own chosen people because of their disobedience. This is the way the biblical economy reads with regard to the fate of the northern kingdom. Hazael said, "What is your servant, who is a mere dog, that he should do this great thing?" And this is another way of saying like, wait, what, little me? I'm going to do all that I'm going to do all those horrible things? How do I even have that in my how's that even a possibility for me? "The Lord has shown me," Elisha said, "the Lord has shown me that you are to be king over Aram." Then he left Elisha and went to his master Ben-Hadad, who said to him, "What did Elisha say to you?" And he answered, "He told me that you would certainly recover." So he does repeat exactly what Elisha tells him to say. But the next day, he took the bed cover and dipped it in water and spread it over the king's face until he died. And Hazael succeeded him. So everything that Elisha said would come true. I mean, he asked him to tell him, was he going to, you should certainly recover. If you were alive, it's like he didn't include the caveat. You'll recover. If you live long enough, you'll recover. But you're not going to live long enough, and you didn't ask that question. Okay, so this is how Hazael becomes king. Remember the situation of the exilic community. They were experiencing chastisement, if you will, from the Lord for their disobedience. And the chastisement was coming at the hand of foreign powers. This was greatly disconcerting, greatly upsetting to the exilic community, but they were This is an example of the way it's sinking into them, the reality of, we brought this on ourselves. That the Lord is at work even outside our sacred enclave of Israel, our promised land. And recognizing that the Lord is at work outside it means that it gives the exilic community hope that they could return. There were some people in the exilic community that were thinking, where is the Lord? The Lord has abandoned us. And what these narratives are trying to do is to hone that in and say, wait a second, the Lord hasn't abandoned us. the Lord is just using these foreign powers to give us our just desserts. And that's a word of hope, because that's much different than the Lord has abandoned us, right? So it will prove to be accurate, because they do end up getting back to the land. So what we see here is that dynamic at work. And this is a very important thing to keep in mind when we read Scripture, is to ask, what's the situation of the people when this story came together. A lot of that we get in these two stories here in the beginning of 2 Kings chapter 8. So next week on Bible Study Wednesday, we will pick up there in verse 16 and go to the end of chapter 8, and we pick up a whole new line of a whole new narrative vein of thought, if you will. Until then, blessings.